Hot off the press, this is my review of the September 22 AAA exam, the first exam sitting with the new 20 professional skills marks. Now, we're going to do a review of both variants of the exam that came up, discussing some of the topics and how hard they were. And we can also do a bit of a review of the exam sitting in terms of the actual physical exam locations. And I'm going to give you some advice on how you can avoid some of the pitfalls that some of my students experienced. So overall, first of all, review of the exams. Well, there were only two variants of the exam paper this time. One of them started with a question called Crown, and the other one with a question called Winbury. Normally, in the past, we've seen three variants of the exam, but this time there seem to be only two. Now, slight caveat here is that I haven't actually seen the exam paper yet. All of this analysis is based on what my students have told me. They've all been WhatsApping me after the exam and chatting about how it went and discussing the paper. So all of this I'm going to tell you comes courtesy of my students. Now, the first variant of the exam then, which was Crown. This one was your kind of, what you describe as your typical Section A question, because it started with audit risk. So it was audit risk around lots of stuff around groups. They'd acquired two subsidiary companies, and so a lot of group accounting in there, quite technical accounting. There were audit procedures around brand revaluations and an ethics requirement with actions within it. Now, I'm saying that's a standard audit risk assignment or still audit risk question. But the feedback I had from students is actually the scenario didn't have a lot of the things in it that you would expect. For example, there was nothing on revenue, and so there were no risks around sales for the business, which is quite unusual. At Section B of the paper, the 225 markers, there was one on due diligence and with a sub-requirement on client acceptance. Now, anytime client acceptance comes up, that's a winner because there are easy marks to be had there if you know what you're doing, and good commercial acumen, professional skills marks too. This one, I had lots of comments from my students that my mock exam prepared them really well for it because we did an acceptance question there. And the other Section B question in the first variant was 3 misstatements that you had to discuss and their potential impact on the audit report. Again, that's a question style that I included in one of my mock exams, so my students felt very well prepared there. Now, I think this was probably the more difficult of the two variants. I wouldn't have wanted this one mainly around the audit risk scenario, where it's heavily focused on something quite specific, technical, group accounting. It's the kind of thing, if you've really revised on the area, you're great, but if you haven't, you could find yourself struggling to pick up marks. The second variant, the Winbury variant, now this was a business risk and risk of material misstatement question, so rather than audit risks. And I was quite pleased that came up because I've been saying that in a lot of my videos on YouTube and advice I've been giving to students that I was tipping business risks to be examined more heavily going forward because the examiner has kind of alluded to that. So I was pleased to see that that did actually happen. So it's business risks and risk of material misstatement. Then procedures around a joint venture, and an ethics scenario that was a little unusual. There'd been a cyber attack and some data protection issues, and we had to comment on the issues around that. So an unusual ethics requirement, but I think quite a nice question one. Anytime that there are business risks, if you know what you're doing, it's quite conceivable to score close to full marks. Then the 25 markers in this variant. First one was a big one on quality control with an engagement quality control review, reviewing the work of a junior. And, well, I was thrilled that this came up because we did a question just like this on my mock exam. And so my students, a lot of them commented that they felt very ready for this question. And the other question was on forecasting and looking at the audit evidence that you would need around a cash receipt. And then the impact on the audit report around something around going concern. Now, this variant I would have preferred to get. The reason being, it had business risks, which, if you know what you're doing, can score lots of marks, and it had lots of procedures within it. And again, audit procedures, if you have a good process, then you can pick up lots of marks quite easily on them. But if you do feel hard done to because you got the crown rather than the berry, well, you should know that ACCA spend a lot of time up front making sure that the difficulty of the two papers is comparable, or the various variants is comparable. And they also, when you look at the pass rates across the variants, there won't be any difference. So whichever of the two variants you got, it will have been of comparable difficulty, both of the type of question, but then also in the way that it is graded as well. So don't feel disadvantaged if you got one or the other. So a few other things to talk about. Time pressure. Did you find it time pressured? Now, I was under the impression from ACCA that the time pressure would be reduced because the scenarios are going to be smaller and there's going to be slightly less requirements because of the professional skills. But that is not the experience that my students had. And lots of them commented that it was incredibly time pressured. And perhaps that's the experience that you had too. One of the key skills in AAA is to be able to pick up marks in a time efficient way. You can't be writing like the examiner does in your answer. You will not finish the paper. Your job is to go round and pick up easier, more time efficient marks and keep moving on and finish the paper. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the experience on exam day. Now, I've got students all around the world, about half of them in the UK, and then I've got students in just about every other country that you can name. Now, in the UK, my students who were based in the Leeds Centre had significant issues. These were sitting in the physical exam location, and there was some sort of issue in the Leeds Centre, which means they couldn't sit the exam. And those people are going to have to delay until December to sit their exam. And I had a student who had technical issues in the Aberdeen Centre as well. And again, there's no option to resit. Some of her exam was lost. She's having to go through the complaints procedure. I also had students in Oman, in Muscat, where there was a power outage and they weren't able to sit the paper. And again, they're going to have to delay to December. If you have issues when you are in a physical exam location, there's no real backup option. If something goes wrong, you have to move to the next exam sitting. However, if you sit the exam remotely, remote invigilation, and crucially, you are sitting the international variant of the paper, then there is a spare exam, an extra exam, that you can sit 1 week later. So I've had students in various locations sit in the exam at home where they had problems, and those students are able to bounce by just 1 week and still sit the exam paper at the September sitting. They'll still get the results at the same time. They can still move on with their studies. So my advice to you, I think the learning point out of that is if you do have the option to sit the exam at home remotely and you're sitting the international variant, I would strongly advise you to take up that option, because if you do have technical issues at home, there's a spare exam. If you have technical issues in an exam location, and that does happen regularly, then you have no option other than to wait until the next exam sitting. Now, hopefully you found your variant of the exam comfortable and you're going to get a great result in October. October the 17th when results come out. But if things don't go your way, I work with lots and lots of students who are resitting. And in fact, that's almost the majority of my students that are resitting, and I get fantastic results with them. My pass rate in June was 81%. That was my official ACCA pass rate versus the global average of 31%. My course and my support really works. So if results don't go your way on October the 17th, you can get in touch with me using the QR code that you can see on screen. Get in touch and I'd be delighted to help you to pass next time around.